on to budget setting. Started by saying start at the top, not the bottom. The way in which we produce service charge budgets is we have a spreadsheet, and it's got 20 odd lines of expenditure on it, and then at the bottom it adds it up, and then it times the percentage that each flat has to pay by that total amount of expenditure, and that tells us what that year's service charge is going to be. Starting at the bottom means you go, actually we all want to pay £80 a month. And then what you've got to do is cut your cloth accordingly at the top. If you buy cleaning at an appropriate value, the cost is what it is. If you buy landscape maintenance at an appropriate value, the cost is what the cost is. Your communal electricity, look at what you spent last year, work out what Ofgem have allowed them to put the prices up by, and that's what needs to go in your budget for electricity. Once you put all those lines in, and your lift maintenance, and your repairs and maintenance, and the cost of your managing agent, and your annual accountancy fee, and VAT, and all the other costs that go into making up what makes up your service charge, you get all of those bits at the top right. The bottom is what the bottom is, and there's not much anyone can do about it. And so if we go to an AGM of a resident management company and we say, right, your service charges this year are going to go from £80 a month to 85, and the meeting goes, no, we're not having that, we only want to pay 80. We go, all right, well tell us where we're going to save that money at the top, because if that's what you want to pay at the bottom, then we can't send you a cleaner quite as often, or we're going to have your windows cleaned half as often, or we're going to have to disconnect your communal heating, or whatever it might be. But it's not, service charges aren't subjective, they're objective. It's a calculation rather than a this is what we would like them to be. And so if you carefully consider what each line of expenditure realistically should be set at, it will be what it is. If each line of expenditure is reasonable, the bottom line is what the bottom line is. You've got to be realistic when you're setting a budget. Nobody wants to pay any more than is absolutely necessary. However, nobody wants to get a bill at the end of the year for a deficit. So it's important to get that right. You know, it's if you over budget, then everyone's parting with more money every month than they have to. Well, quite obviously no one wants that. But if you under budget, everyone pays a bit less every month, but it just gets billed at the end of the year. So you've not achieved anything. At the end of the year, once you add up your on-account service charges plus your deficit, you've paid what you would have paid if your service charges had been right and you've been able to budget for them. So it's just about getting it right and making sure that it's correct.
At City Key, for example, under Trinity Estates, we were getting billed for the year-end deficit more than for the entire service charge in the rest of the year, all in one go. I mean, it was just horrendous. Since we took over as the RMC, we've never had a year-end deficit, and it's made it much more manageable for people on limited incomes to be able to budget. We think it's a service to our residents to make sure that they can budget throughout the year for the service charge, and so we've never yet in, I think it's 5 years, 6 years now, never had a year-end deficit.
They're universally hated. And I can absolutely understand why. You think you've paid your bills all year, and suddenly you get this extra one that no one was expecting, and they can be for mega amounts of money. Yeah. We took over the management of a development on the 1st of January, and I won't name any names. And in taking it over, service charges went up from the previous managing agent. And one or two leaseholders have been saying, well, you know, we've appointed you and we're paying more. And I go, yeah, but actually the 2013 accounts have just been produced and there's a deficit on them of £500,000. And so actually you add up their share of that deficit plus what they were paying the previous managing agent, and they're actually paying us less. It's just we've got it right and the previous managing agent had got it wrong and was charging them far too little all year and then hitting them with a big bill at the year end, and it goes down like an absolute lead balloon. Consider the unexpected and what may be around the corner. Again, expecting the unexpected is a bit of, it doesn't quite make sense. But it's worth building a contingency of sorts into a budget. Again, you just don't know. Are you going to have a massive water leak that's going to flood the communal areas where you're going to have an excess to pay? Just to try and build some of those a little bit of slack within a budget. And I mean, when we're doing a budget, we would make allowances against all of the plant and equipment of the development. So we say, okay, is there a communal television system? Yes. Well, let's assume we're going to have to repair that. Is there a door entry system? Yes. Let's assume we're going to have to repair that. Is there a water pump? Let's assume we're going to have to repair that. And we put a number against each of those things. The reality, of course, will be that we won't have to repair them all next year. But the reality might well be that we have to repair the door entry system twice and the TV aerial never at all. So actually, overall, the number's about right. It's possibly been put in as an allowance against a heading that hasn't actually been used.
Again, that's a really important question because we've got one flat roof, we've got 13 blocks, all of which are pitch roof except one. And the flat roof, the roof blew off last year during a major storm. And we then found we weren't insured for the flat roof. We then found we couldn't insure it, which is why we weren't insured. No insurance would give us insurance for it. So we were landed with a £60,000 bill that wasn't budgeted for. But we covered it without a year-end deficit because we'd managed so carefully all our different funds that we were able to take a massive hit without stopping our refurbishment program that was going on at the same time. So I think you'd never know what's around the corner.
Yep.
And it's really important to be able to have something built in. You can't run the ship so tight that when a big disaster happens, everything's thrown into complete disarray.
I think the point Jerry's made there I'll probably cover shortly, and I appreciate I've got to speed up a little bit. When it comes to sinking funds and reserve funds and things like that, which is your rainy day money for things like that. Look at historic expenditure. Think about known future expenditure. So if you know that you're replacing all your carpets next year, it's got to be paid for from somewhere. It needs to be built into the budget. And then known variations. Over the last few years, the rate of VAT has gone up and down. That clearly affects the budget. As I referred to before, utility prices increase. If you know electricity is going up 10% next year, then you're silly not to put your electricity up by 10% because you know it's going to happen. Consult with interested parties when drafting it. Get buy-in. It's much better, I find, to take people with you rather than to impose things on them. So explain to people why the service charge is going to be what the service charge is. We quite often hear, my friend lives in a development around the corner and they only pay £60 a month, why are we paying 80? It's a valid question, but it's one therefore that you better try and provide an answer to. Well, the answer is that you've got 3 lifts and 60 flats, and actually they've got 180 flats and only 1 lift. Therefore, yours is going to be more than theirs. So again, just having that dialogue and being able to have buy-in. And I can't stress it enough throughout everything I will talk about on leasehold management is always follow the lease. If the lease says that the budget needs to be prepared and distributed 2 months before the beginning of the service charge year, then that's what has to happen. We've got a particular lease that actually specifies it needs to be distributed on the first day of the financial year. And if that's a Sunday, we have to send someone out on a Sunday to go and hand deliver it, because that's what the lease says has to happen. It's badly drafted, but it is what it is.
Blame the solicitors again.
Absolutely.